We're not betting against China. There's a number of misconceptions about what we're saying, and what we are saying in a series of talks that I'm giving this week in the UK is that China is undergoing a property bubble and a fixed investment bubble. Now, we're not making any calls on the Chinese economy overall, or the currency, or the current account status vis-a-vis the U.S. and the West. But what is pretty clear to us, based on our work, is that there is a monumental property bubble and fixed asset investment bubble that China has underway right now, and deflating that gently will be difficult at best.
It's an important point you're making there, because you're not betting against Chinese growth per se. You're saying you're finding issues with the sustainability, or perhaps some areas that there are asset bubbles. Let me ask you, though, I mean, we've seen the Chinese increase the reserve requirements. They've asked some banks to limit lending. They've raised the yield on, 3-month and 1-year bills. What would you need to see for them to do before you were more comfortable that they had some of those bubbles under control?
I mean, recent history in our economy and here in Western Europe tells us that deflating bubbles is no easy feat. And we're just going to monitor things like everybody else. But the problem with this is that the people that have brought you the bubble are now the ones who are going to supposedly deflate it. The issue is that this is all on the back of the Chinese government. And unlike the West, where GDP is the result of the actions of free market participants, in China, it's the exact opposite, Margaret. In China, the economy runs to the tune of the GDP growth target. That is, there's a GDP growth target set, and then levers are pulled and buttons are pushed to get there. And I think that that's a major, major difference. It's sort of like the old Soviet 5-year plans, although done a lot more efficiently.
I want to ask you, because when you came out with this call, or there were reports of this call, not the detail that you're giving now, it raised a lot of skeptics to come to the forefront, some notable ones. I mean, I've gotten notes from some of the biggest China watchers out there asking me to ask you how you're coming up with some of this level of skepticism that you seem to have. Jim O'Neill said to me, that line that you had, that China could be Dubai times 1,000, he said the only similarity he sees is that the population of China is 900 times bigger than that of Dubai. That if China gets to Dubai's wealth per head, you'd be at $50 trillion. Can you explain that specific quote to me, that China could be Dubai times 1,000?
Well, my critics have glommed onto all kinds of things and don't seem to sometimes see tongue firmly placed in cheek. I said Dubai, China could be Dubai times 100 or 1,000. We'll see. The 1,000 clearly times talking about population, the lower number talking about things like debt level and other things. My critics have glommed onto the fact that I've never been in mainland China, for example. And yet Mr. O'Neill himself admittedly had never been in 3 of the 4 BRICS that he so aptly and profitably named back in '01. He'd only been to 1 of them. So, I take all these things with a big grain of salt. We expect to be knocked in these kinds of things. There's a lot of people who have a lot of riding on China. It was the same thing when we talked about residential real estate a few years back, or the credit rating agencies, or God forbid Enron or something like that. I mean, you expect to get people throwing stones at you when you live in glass houses, I guess.
I want to ask you quickly here. You are a hedge fund manager here, very notable one. I want to ask for your outlook on your industry, given some of the recent regulatory proposals we've seen in the United States, among them portioning off hedge funds, private equity, proprietary trading from investment banks. What is this going to do to your industry?
I don't know. It's too early to tell, because we've seen the heat, and the reality in the last year has been that the actual regs tend to get watered down after the initial rhetoric. I'm actually hoping that's not the case. I think these activities should be separate, and we've called for that. In many ways, it could make life easier for the external hedge fund manager. We won't be competing with the big proprietary trading desks for some of this activity.
So you're supporting the Volcker rule?
I'm a big supporter of the Volcker rule.